In 1324, a man left home for a business trip. By the time he got back, he had personally wrecked the economy of an entire foreign country. He didn't invade it, he didn't tax it, he just gave people too much gold. This is the story of Mansa Musa, ruler of the Mali Empire, the richest human being who has ever lived. Not richest African, richest person, ever. Adjusted for inflation, more money than Bezos, Musk, and Gates combined, and then some. And if that's true, why did most of us never hear his name in school? Let's fix that. First, some context. By the 1300s, the Mali Empire covered a chunk of West Africa roughly the size of Western Europe. It controlled the trans-Saharan trade routes, meaning if gold, salt, or copper moved across the Sahara, Mali got a cut. Think of it like owning the only highway between two continents and putting a toll booth on it. Except the toll booth also happened to be sitting on the biggest gold reserve on the planet. Historians estimate Mali controlled close to half the world's gold supply. Half. Not half of Africa's, half of the entire planet's. For comparison, imagine one country today just quietly holding half the world's oil and nobody talks about it. That's the scale we're dealing with. Mansa Musa took the throne around 1312. Mansa means king or emperor. He was by most accounts a genuinely competent ruler. He expanded the empire, kept the peace, invested heavily in education. But he's remembered today for one specific decision. In 1324, he decided to go on Hajj, the Islamic pilgrimage to Mecca, which every Muslim who's able is expected to complete once in their life. Kings going on religious pilgrimages wasn't unusual. How Mansa Musa did it? That was unusual. He brought an estimated 60,000 people with him. Some accounts say up to 12,000 were personal attendants. 500 of them each carried a staff made of solid gold. 500 people, basically walking accessories made of pure wealth. He brought somewhere between 80 and 100 camels, each one loaded with roughly 300 pounds of gold. Picture the world's most extravagant road trip if the tour bus was 100 camels and the merch was solid gold. And this wasn't a quiet, dignified caravan. Wherever he went, he gave gold away, to the poor, to strangers on the street, to anyone who impressed him. He built a mosque every single Friday, wherever the caravan happened to be that week. Imagine your favorite celebrity going on tour, and instead of throwing t-shirts into the crowd, they're throwing out solid gold bars and building a new building in every city, every week, just because they felt like it. Then he hit Cairo. Cairo at the time was one of the biggest and richest cities on earth. Mansa Musa stayed for months, and he kept giving away gold. So much of it, so fast, that gold itself lost value in Cairo's economy. Prices spiked. Inflation hit hard. Historians estimate it took Egypt's economy over a decade, more than 10 years to fully recover. Let that sink in for a second. This man didn't conquer Egypt. He didn't tax Egypt. He walked through being generous, and it wrecked their economy for over a decade. Imagine posting one Instagram story of you casually throwing money at people, and the country you're visiting is still dealing with the inflation 10 years later. That's not a flex. That's a natural disaster with better PR. Here's the part that usually gets left out when people just meme the gold story. This trip put Mali on the map, literally.
European mapmakers of the time started drawing him onto maps of the known world, sitting on a throne holding a massive gold nugget, bigger than any other figure drawn anywhere on the map. For decades afterward, Mali was one of the only African kingdoms Europeans actually knew existed and respected as a major world power. This was word-of-mouth fame 700 years before social media, spreading purely because one man's wealth was too big to ignore. And it wasn't just a flex trip. On the way home, Mansa Musa brought scholars, architects, and religious teachers back to Mali with him. He commissioned mosques, including the Jingareber Mosque in Timbuktu, which is still standing today, 700 years later. He turned Timbuktu into a center of Islamic learning, complete with a university and library system that pulled in scholars from across Africa and the Middle East. Tens of thousands of manuscripts from that era still exist, covering science, law, astronomy, medicine. This was a functioning academic hub, roughly the same era Europe was still deep in its own dark ages in a lot of places. So this wasn't just rich guy goes on vacation. This was a turning point that put West Africa on the global map, funded generations of scholarship, and left architecture standing today, 7 centuries later. So why don't more people know this? Partly because pre-colonial African history just got skipped over in a lot of school curriculums outside the continent. Partly because it's a lot easier to sell a story about a continent that was discovered by outsiders than a continent that had empires richer than anywhere else on Earth. Mansa Musa isn't a footnote. For a solid chunk of the 14th century, he was, by most estimates, the richest and most powerful man alive on the planet, and outside West Africa, almost nobody was ever taught his name. So next time somebody tells you Africa has no history, tell them about the time one man walked through Egypt and broke the economy by being too generous. I'm Curious Man. Subscribe for more African history they didn't teach you in school.